Off the top, he said, she said. 3 topics, 2 minutes each. Anything goes. As always, there are no taboos. Do you think the death penalty should be taboo? I know, it's a personal decision. For some, it's a religious decision. But let's look at it from the standpoint of dollars and cents. Roughly $4 billion has been spent since 1978 to execute only 13 inmates. That's the point an anti-death penalty group is hammering home as they try to get this on the ballot. Former LA District Attorney Gil Garcetti is on the bandwagon as well. He says abolishing the death penalty in favor of life in prison without parole actually saves money and would allow $100 million over the next 3 years to be reinvested in state law enforcement. Those who support the death penalty say the system can be fixed financially with some tweaks. Our contributors, the editor of Turner's 2 Cents, Cameron Turner, and doctor of social ethics, Charlotte Laws. Our pictures are furnished by Skype. Charlotte, I'll start with you. Keep the death penalty or abolish it?
I say abolish it. I've always been against it for a host of reasons, and one of them being fiscal. And you're right, there are 13 people that have been executed in the past 30 years, but more people have died of natural causes on death row. In fact, 71 people, because the average wait time is about 25 years. And you may remember a year ago, there were a bunch of articles about inmates wanting to be transferred to death row because they knew that they weren't going to end up being killed for a very long time, and they were going to get lots of perks because you get more phone time and TV time and visitors, etc. Because we spend $138,000 a year for the death row people and $49,000 a year for the other people. So I think it's completely a waste of money. If you look at the $4 billion and break it down.
Charlotte, you're suggesting if you're in prison and you want to go to death row, it's like you're going to a 5-star hotel. I
know. That's what was so funny. There were a bunch of articles about this. So, yeah, I mean, the 13 people that died, we spent, what, $308 million per person, which means what we could have done is we could have spent that money on California school kids and put them all the way through school, 333,000 of those school kids. That would have been a better way to spend the money.
Cameron, what do you think about this?
Well, I am not opposed to the death penalty. I tend to agree with the comedian Robin Harris, who back in the 80s had that hilarious but potent routine where the punchline was, gotta go, gotta go. There are certain people who do certain things that are so heinous that death is the appropriate punishment. However, the system is not functioning, and as relates to this particular issue, Donald McCartan, he's a retired Superior Court judge in Orange County. He wrote a very compelling op-ed piece in the LA Times on March 25th of this year, in which he pointed out that the long, interminable process of appeals and appeals and appeals, that 25 years that Charlotte spoke of, that inmates remain on death row, that process ends up re-victimizing the families of victims. They cannot bring closure to their pain because there is no end to this. So the strongest argument for ending the death penalty is that putting offenders on death in prison without possibility of parole will help families bring closure to this. But the death penalty is a good idea. It just ain't working.
All right, so what you're suggesting is if they can tweak the system and get it figured out, you're in favor of it, right?
You know what? Certain people need to be taken out. I mean, I'm pretty liberal on almost everything, but there are some acts committed by some people among us that are just beyond the pale.
Most civilized countries have abolished it, Cameron. Most civilized countries have abolished it. And we're with China, Iran, Yemen, and North Korea, and the United States are the top 5 countries that kill people. That's who we're keeping company with.
All right.
Well, well, we can debate. I think I'm not opposed to the death penalty.
All right, fine.
But I like saving the money, and I like making life easier for people who have suffered as a result of their family members.
All right, let's move on. Tuition at state colleges and universities continues to rise, as you can well imagine. The students and their parents are not happy about that. How do you think they feel about this? The state Senate approved a bill that would allow illegal immigrant students to apply for state-funded financial aid. Yep, the California DREAM Act. State Assembly expected to pass it, and then it goes on to the governor. One thing to remember here. Under the bill, illegal immigrant students would have to meet the same requirements as others, but would only be eligible for the money that remains after legal residents apply. 2 questions come to mind. First, why wouldn't all the money go to legal residents? Second, if any is left over, should taxpayers be paying to send illegal immigrants to school? Cameron, you pay your taxes. Do you agree with this?
Well, I think the DREAM Act is an excellent idea, and I would love to see it enacted on a national level as well as on the state level. So I'm in favor of this. Let's be clear about who is going to benefit from this initiative. We're talking about students who are either in high school now, getting ready to go to college, or who are currently in college. Yes, they have an undocumented status, but we're talking about students who came here as kids. They were brought here by their parents. They didn't have a choice in that matter, and yet, in the face of enormous odds, everything from language barriers to grinding poverty to high crime environments, these students have elevated themselves, worked hard all the way through school, have gotten to college. It is to our benefit as the state of California to educate as many young people as we can. And when we have students who have demonstrated the kind of dedication and commitment that it takes to be admitted to and work through college, we ought to be giving them a helping hand and helping them to succeed.
All right, now here's a yes or a no that I'm going to move on to Charlotte. So what you're saying to me is if one of your kids applies for a scholarship at a school and doesn't get it, but an illegal immigrant, an undocumented person gets it, you're fine with that, correct?
Assuming
yes
that
no?
the illegal...
No, Cameron, yes or no? Yes
I'm
or no?
fine with it.
You're fine. Okay.
The answer is more complicated, but the answer is yes,
we don't
I'm
have
fine
time for the complicated answer. Go ahead,
no
Charlotte.
Problem.
Well, I disagree with you again, Cameron. First of all, I feel that if you're going to be you're educating these kids, and then they can't even get a legal job once they get finished with college. So what are they going to do? They have to go back to their home country, start their own business, compete against American businesses in the global economy. That's crazy. Sacramento is talking about this as leftover money after the legal kids get it. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. When you have a $25 billion deficit in the state, there is no such thing as leftover money. And third of all, something I haven't heard anyone discuss at all is the mechanism by which you're going to recoup the money if you give a loan to an illegal student. I called Sallie Mae today, and they handled all the federal loans up until a year ago for the country, and they said the only way to do it is through a Social Security number. And these kids are not going to have a Social Security number, so you're actually giving them an advantage. You're saying, here's your loan. By the way, we know we can't collect on the money that we gave you, but American kids, oh, well, we have your Social Security number, and you're going to pay us back. And if you read all the recent articles, there are American kids going into prostitution to pay off their school loans. I think it's a really bad idea. It's absolutely absurd, and it incentivizes people to come over the border and come to this country illegally.
All right, we're going to move on now. Last topic, you disagreed on that. What about this? After the filter, you can change the channel. You can find a show filled with violence. You can find a show with nudity. You can find a show with profanity. And if you tried hard enough, you'd win the trifecta and find a show with all three. That's already on TV. But according to some people, NBC's upcoming Playboy Club should not be. The show premieres on September 19th. The NBC affiliate in Salt Lake refuses to air it. Women's group in San Francisco says it's demeaning to women. Keep in mind, nobody's seen it yet. Also keep in mind that whatever it is, it's broadcast television. It's going to be tame compared to what you can find on cable. The show is about the Playboy Club in the 60s. The executive producer says the show is about empowering women to be whatever they want to be. Is the initial reaction to the Playboy Club an overreaction by some? Or do they have a point, Charlotte?
It's an overreaction. There are lots of things you can say are sexist or demeaning. You could say Cinderella or some of the fairy tales or Pretty Women or I Love Lucy was considered that some time ago. But I looked at some of the clips of this upcoming show, and I see this as historical fiction. I think it's kind of interesting seeing that world, and I think you can definitely make an argument that these women are empowered. First of all, it's their choice to be there. Secondly, they're making a heck of a lot of money. And if they were working in some minimum wage job at a department store, you could say perhaps they're not as empowered as they are when they're making a lot of money in this club. And it reminded me of myself, actually. In 1980, I wasn't a Playboy bunny. Started a job in Las Vegas.
I thought you were going to say, you know, in my varied travels, I was a Playboy bunny, but you weren't, right?
No, but I started a job in Las Vegas. I made up a job called chip hustling, and I was 20 years old, and I worked 10 hours a week, and I made the equivalent of $260,000 a year in this job for 2 years. And it was total. I had to deal with sexism all the time, demeaning comments from customers and from employees, but I felt empowered.
All right, I'm glad you did. We can't go over your entire resume right now, though. Cameron, go ahead.
I think the difference, though, is Charlotte's talking about 1980. This show takes place in 1963, where the opportunities for women were significantly more limited. First of all, as to their making a lot of money, we know from the article that Gloria Steinem wrote, some 30 years ago, when she went undercover as a bunny, that most of the women who worked in these clubs did not make a lot of money. They went in told, hey, you're going to make $200, $300 a week, and most of them didn't make anywhere near that. So the financial empowerment was not there. Secondly, making a lot of money does not automatically mean empowerment. Burt Williams, the African-American comedian who put on blackface back in the turn of the century, one year made more money than the President of the United States. But he couldn't walk in the front door of most places in this country. The man had a lot of money, but he did not have any power. Likewise, the women in this show, as it is depicted, I have not seen the pilot. This is not a group of women who are taking control of their environment, nor are they functioning in an environment wherein they have any measurable power. So I don't think the empowerment argument holds any water at all. I think,
all right. You know what? We're going to leave it right there because you made your point. And I can say that on all three topics, you disagree. Neither one of you could come to a consensus on any of them. And to that I say, well done. Good job, you guys. I'll talk to you again soon.